A new champion has been crowned, but it's in a category where no one would want to take home this crown. I have a new award, and I'm giving it out to Ahab's House of Horrors by Kyle Greenwood and David Schreiner. The award is Worst Book Title Ever. Out of all the titles for all the books I have ever read, Ahab's House of Horrors is the worst. Why? This book isn't really about the house of Ahab, for one. It's about the dynasty of the house of Omri, of which Ahab is only one part, so it should be Omri's House of Horror. And second, I have no idea why it's called House of Horrors. There is nothing in the book suggesting anything horrific in Ahab's house. That's not to say nothing horrific occurred under Ahab's reign. Just read the story of Naboth's vineyard to learn one example. But nothing horrific in Ahab's generation or the reign of the house of Omri is covered in this book. I thought we would learn historical insights into the depravity and darkness of Omri's dynasty. I would learn some new facts about their warfare tactics and how they adopted some horrific passages of other nations based upon the archaeological discoveries found in that region. But there is none of that in this book. So if you want to learn what archaeology can teach us about the time period of the dynasty of Omri, I encourage you to read the lives of ordinary people in ancient Israel, or watch my review on that, or do both. I was hoping this book would dive into the kings in ancient Israel to add to what I learned from Deaver's book, but alas, didn't find that. Now, there was some helpful and interesting material in this book. It was just in no way related to the title. And that ruined a lot of my enjoyment for this book, and I don't want the same thing to happen to you if you decide to read it. Welcome to Rev Reads, your home for book reviews from the perspective of a pastor. If you're new to the channel and want to discover more historical and world-building books, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up to date with my most current reviews. If you're a regular to the channel, please share this video to help others learn about what the book Ahab's House of Horror is really about. Now, the subtitle of Ahab's House of Horrors is A Historiographic Study of the Military Campaigns of the House of Omri. Now, that should have just been the title of the book, but I'm going to guess they went with Ahab's House of Horrors because this one's kind of a mouthful. I might have called this book The Feudal Boasts of Ancient Kings, or The Claims of God Against the Boasts of Man. This book actually covers what is a very intriguing topic. How do we align the Bible's takes on the descriptions of the military campaigns of the House of Omri with the records of pagan nations from the same time period? The accounts in the Bible do not easily line up with or agree with the Tel Dan stele, or the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, or the Moabite stone. So how should we respond? What should we do when the Bible's account contradicts the accounts of other nations for these Bible stories? Do we throw out what's in the Bible? Do we throw out the Moabite stone? Or do the accounts of these battles from two different perspectives actually shine additional light on what we find in the biblical account? Now, this is a fascinating question, and I'm glad to have read a book covering this topic. I like reading about the historical reconstructions on what these ancient relics from the past tell us about Israel's enemies and at times Israel's ally. But I think the one key to remember while reading a book like this, the thing you should remember comes from the work of Lester Grab, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. He writes, historical reconstruction involves judgment, creativity, imagination, a commitment to guidelines, and a willingness to reconsider conclusions in light of new evidence. In other words, don't take any of these theories regarding how these stones relate to the Bible as facts, and especially don't take any theories as facts that reconstruct the biblical narrative by stripping out parts of the Bible. You see, there was one point in the book where I'm not sure if it was the authors who were questioning this or other historians that they were referring to, but they were questioning how odd it was that Elisha was placed in 2 Kings 3, as if that must be a later addition to add religion into the story, and so it was seen as kind of mysterious that Elisha would be there. But I'm surprised that anyone would find it odd that Elisha would choose to travel with the combined forces of Israel and Judah when they went to battle. Seems like that would be an important place for God's prophet to be. The authors did, though, do a good job pointing out that it is difficult at times to separate fact from fiction in a pagan king's boast. There's usually a kernel of truth behind all of those pagan boasts, but it's nearly impossible to draw the line from where the truth ends and the stretching of the truth begins. I did find their insight into the concept of harem to be helpful. Harem, or setting aside a people to the ban or destruction. It might not be the total annihilation we thought it was, where every person and every animal needs to be killed in a village. Examining its brief use in other people groups, which was brought out in this book, as well as what Matthew Lynch brought out in Flood and Fury, I think the ban is meant to just be destruction of armies and not citizens and everyone in a town or city. The best section in the book was on the description of Israel as two little flocks in 1 Kings 20:27. The sons of Israel were mustered and were provisioned and went to meet them. And the sons of Israel camped before them like two little flocks of goats. But the Arameans filled the country. They argued that a better translation might be two sexually agitated goats. One, I found that slightly humorous, but also it just makes better sense for the story. And if you want to know where they got that idea, you should read the book. Now, I did often find myself disagreeing with the authors, but that's what happens when we walk into the ground of comparing the history of the Bible with the history of nations and trying to make sense why the Moabites or the Arameans would write one thing about a battle or a historical moment, and the Bible would tell us something different. Now, there must be some reason for their views, and those theories are often interesting, and it's nice to debate why the Teldan steel or the Moabite stone would say what they do, but we also need to remember that due to the brevity of what's written on those stones, I don't know how we can really have any confidence how those most of the time partial accounts would truly align with the Bible. It's really interesting to discuss how they might. I think everyone who's a serious student about the Old Testament should take a look at those two artifacts. And I must confess, the only thing I knew about the Teldan steel going into this book was its reference to the house of David. So I did enjoy learning what else that artifact had to say. Now, Ahab's House of Horrors, probably not going to sit in my list of favorite books of 2023. The title alone brought me a good deal of frustration as I read it, but this book does help the reader have a broader understanding of the divided kingdom, the house of Omri, and how even when at first glance it may seem like the account of another nation that we discover in archaeology seems to fly in the face and disregard the biblical account, those two might actually not be as far off as we first thought. This is quality work. It's thought-provoking by Greenwood and Schreiner. I'm glad they wrote it. I'm glad they were willing to engage on the topic. And I think everybody who reads this will learn a little bit more about the dynasty of Omri.